Director Reed stared at the data floating on his holographic screen for the fifth time that day. He rubbed his tired eyes, but the numbers didn't change. After 20 years of observing pre-FTL civilizations, he had never seen anything like this. "Computer, run the analysis again," he ordered, his voice heavy with disbelief. The artificial intelligence hummed softly. "Analysis complete. Results unchanged. Human behavioral patterns show no indication of the universal surrender response." Reed stood up from his desk and walked to the window of his office in the Intergalactic Council's observation tower. Below him, representatives of 1,000 species went about their daily business, each carrying the same basic instinct that had helped their ancestors survive: knowing when to give up. The door chimed. "Enter," Reed called out, not turning from the window. "Sir, the council is waiting," his assistant said. "They're expecting your report on Earth." Reed gathered his datapad and straightened his uniform. The walk to the council chamber felt longer than usual. "How do you tell the most powerful beings in the galaxy that you found something impossible?" The council chamber was packed. News had spread that the Earth observation team had found something unusual, and no one wanted to miss it. 50 council members sat in their elevated seats, forming a perfect circle around the presentation area. Reed stepped onto the floating platform in the center of the chamber. It rose slowly until he was at eye level with the council members. "Honorable members of the council," he began, "today I bring you findings that will change our understanding of sentient life." He gestured, and holographic displays lit up around the chamber. "For the past 5 years, we have been observing Earth, a pre-FTL civilization in the Orion Spiral Arm. What we found defies everything we know about evolutionary psychology." He pulled up video footage from Earth's history. "These are humans fighting in what they called World War II. Notice this group of soldiers. They're completely surrounded, outnumbered 10 to 1, with no supplies or hope of rescue." The footage played, showing the soldiers fighting on. "They should have surrendered. Every species we know would have surrendered, but they didn't." Murmurs spread through the chamber. A council member from the Unified Systems raised his hand. "Perhaps this is an isolated incident." Reed shook his head. "That's what we thought at first." He showed more footage. The lone ship fighting off pirates. A city refusing to yield to a superior force. A small group holding off an army. This pattern repeats throughout their history. Humans simply don't give up, even when all logic says they should. "Impossible," shouted one of the council members. "Every species evolves a surrender response. It's crucial for survival. Without it, they would have wiped themselves out long ago." "That's the fascinating part," Reed continued. "Humans understand the concept of surrender. They know what it means. They just choose not to do it. They have somehow evolved to override this basic survival instinct with something else." He displayed brain scan comparisons. "Look at these neural patterns. Where other species show activation in the surrender response region when faced with overwhelming odds, humans show increased activity in regions associated with problem-solving and determination." The council chamber erupted in heated discussion. Reed waited patiently as the council members debated among themselves. Finally, the High Speaker raised her hand for silence. "Director Reed," she said, her voice echoing in the quiet chamber, "what are your recommendations regarding this species?" Reed took a deep breath. "Honorable Speaker, humanity is on the verge of discovering FTL travel. We have perhaps 5 years before they join the galactic community. We must decide now. Do we welcome them, knowing they lack this fundamental survival mechanism? Or do we consider them too dangerous to contact?" The chamber fell silent again. Reed could see the fear in some council members' eyes, the fascination in others. He had just told them that a species had evolved without what they considered a crucial safety switch. "There's one more thing," Reed added. "This trait appears to be infectious. Their stories of determination against impossible odds have already begun spreading through our information networks. Other species are starting to ask questions about their own surrender responses." The High Speaker's expression turned grave. "Then we have no choice. We must decide how to handle this situation before humanity makes that decision for us. As Reed left the chamber that day, he couldn't help but wonder. Had they just discovered humanity's greatest weakness or its greatest strength? Ambassador White didn't expect her first day representing Earth to involve a standoff. Yet here she stood on the Council Station's main deck, facing down 3 Dominion warships through the massive observation window. Behind her, Council members whispered nervously among themselves. "Your species will show proper respect." The Dominion commander's voice boomed through the station's communications system. His ship's weapons were aimed directly at the small Earth vessel that had brought White and her team to the station. "With all due respect," White replied calmly, "we're new here. Perhaps you could explain what we did wrong." Director Reed, watching from the side, admired her composure. The Council had voted to make contact with humanity 6 months ago, and so far, everything had gone smoothly. Until today, when the human delegation had apparently committed some terrible faux pas by not bowing to the Dominion representative. "Your kind stands in the presence of superiors," the Dominion commander bellowed. "You will kneel, or we will destroy your ship." White turned to Reed, genuine confusion on her face. "Is he serious?" Reed nodded grimly. "The Dominion believes in absolute displays of submission from lesser species." "I see." White turned back to the window. "Commander, we have a saying on Earth. We don't negotiate with terrorists. Your threats are noted and rejected." The Council chamber erupted in gasps. Reed felt his heart skip a beat. This was exactly what they had feared. Humanity's inability to back down, even in the face of certain destruction. "You have 10 minutes to comply," the Dominion commander growled, cutting the communication. One of the Council members rushed forward. "Ambassador White, please, this is madness. Your ship has no weapons. They will destroy it with all your crew aboard." White smiled, and Reed recognized the same expression he'd seen in countless historical videos of humans facing impossible odds. "Our ship might not have weapons," she said, "but it has something better." She pressed her communicator. "Captain Thompson, are you ready?" "Ready and waiting, Ambassador," came the reply. "What are they doing?" the Council member asked Reed anxiously. Before Reed could answer, the Earth ship's engines flared to life. But instead of retreating, it accelerated directly toward the center Dominion warship. "They're going to ram them," Reed whispered in disbelief. "They're using their entire ship as a weapon." The Dominion ships, caught off guard by this seemingly suicidal move, scattered in confusion. Their perfect formation broke apart, their weapons no longer trained on the Earth vessel. "Now, Captain," White commanded. The Earth ship suddenly released thousands of small metallic objects, space debris that completely surrounded the Dominion ships. Their sensors, designed to track energy weapons and large objects, were overwhelmed by the cloud of tiny threats. "A human tactic called chaff," White explained to the stunned Council. "Sometimes the best defense is making your enemy unable to see." The Dominion ships, their targeting systems blinded, were forced to power down their weapons. They couldn't fire without risking hitting each other through the debris field. "This is impossible," the Council member muttered. "No species would risk their only ship, their only way home." "That's where you're wrong," White said. "Sometimes the only way to win is to be willing to lose everything." She activated the communication system again. "Commander, shall we discuss proper diplomatic protocols now? As equals?" The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, the Dominion commander responded, his voice noticeably less confident. "Perhaps we can overlook the formalities this time." As the tension in the chamber eased, Reed made a note in his datapad. Under human characteristics, he added, "Warning, will turn disadvantages into advantages. Responds to threats by becoming more dangerous." The Council would have much to discuss after this, but one thing was clear: humanity wasn't just refusing to surrender. They were rewriting the rules of what was possible. The Dominion's Supreme Commander paced in front of the Council's main display screen, his thick armored tail leaving marks on the polished floor. "This insult cannot stand," he roared. "The humans must submit, or we will make them submit." Director Reed watched as Ambassador White calmly sipped her coffee, seemingly unbothered by the alien warlord's rage. The emergency council session had been going on for 6 hours now, and the humans were the only ones who hadn't shown signs of exhaustion. "Supreme Commander," White said, setting down her cup, "I've transmitted your demands to Earth. Would you like to hear their response?" Finally, the commander's scales rippled with satisfaction. "Read their surrender terms." White pulled out a small datapad. The message reads, "Dear Dominion, regarding your demand for Earth's surrender, we don't know how. Have you tried asking nicely?" Signed, Earth Defense Council. The chamber fell silent. Reed covered his face with his hands. Several council members made quiet noises that in their species indicated extreme distress. "They mock us." The Supreme Commander's voice was deadly quiet. "Not at all," White replied. "We genuinely don't know how to surrender. We checked our history books. Every time someone surrendered to us, it ended badly for everyone involved. We decided it's not worth trying." A council member from the Scientific Alliance stepped forward. "Perhaps I can explain the concept in simpler terms," he offered. "When a superior force demands submission, you must." "Oh, we understand the concept perfectly," White interrupted. "We just decided a long time ago that it's a stupid concept. No offense intended." The Supreme Commander slammed his fist on the podium. "Then we will teach you. The Dominion fleet will arrive at Earth in 3 standard cycles. We will demonstrate proper submission to the entire galaxy." White stood up. For the first time, her pleasant diplomatic smile faded. "Commander, let me be very clear. If you send your fleet to Earth, we will not surrender. We will not submit. We will fight. And here's the interesting part. We'll probably lose the first few battles badly." The commander looked confused. "You admit you will lose?" "Oh yes," White continued. "You have better ships, better weapons, more experience. You'll probably destroy many of our cities. Kill millions of our people. And that's exactly why you should be terrified." Reed noticed several council members backing away from the human ambassador. Her voice had taken on a quality he had never heard before, something ancient and dangerous. "Because after you kill millions of us, something interesting will happen. We'll learn. We'll adapt. We'll take your weapons apart and figure out how they work. We'll find your weaknesses. And we will never, ever stop." "You speak madness," the commander scoffed, but Reed noticed a slight tremor in his voice. "Let me tell you a story," White said. "Once, humans fought a war against an enemy that seemed unbeatable. They had better weapons, better positions, better everything. They killed thousands of us. And you know what we did? We studied their weapons, copied their tactics, and improved them. The war lasted 7 years. Want to guess who won?" The Scientific Alliance member quickly accessed Earth's history on his datapad. His eyes widened. "Impossible." "So yes, Commander," White continued, "you can send your fleet. You can start this war. But understand something. Humans don't have a word for a fight that ends in surrender. We only have 2 outcomes: victory or extinction. Are you sure you want to find out which one this will be?" The Supreme Commander stared at White for a long moment. Without another word, he turned and stormed out of the chamber. Reed quickly added another note to his ever-growing file on human behavior. Update: humans appear to become more determined when faced with certain defeat. Traditional intimidation tactics produce opposite of intended effect. The council members whispered among themselves, but White just picked up her coffee cup again. "Anyone else want to discuss surrender terms?" she asked pleasantly. No one did. Commander Stone stood on the bridge of the Earth defense ship Thunder, watching as the Dominion fleet emerged from hyperspace. 300 massive warships against Earth's hastily assembled fleet of 50 converted cargo vessels and 30 proper warships. The odds were exactly how he liked them. Impossible. Enemy ships launching fighters, his tactical officer reported. They're following standard Dominion attack patterns. Stone smiled. Standard. That's their first mistake. He switched on the fleet-wide communication. All ships, execute Operation Crazy Ivan. Director Reed, watching from the Council observation vessel at a safe distance, couldn't believe his eyes. Instead of forming a defensive line, the Earth ships scattered in seemingly random directions. Even more shockingly, they shut down their engines. What are they doing? A council member asked. They're making themselves helpless. Reed shook his head. No, they're doing something very human. The Dominion fleet, confronted with this apparent mass malfunction, hesitated. Their fighters slowed their approach, scanning for traps. In space warfare, ships simply didn't go dark voluntarily. Now, Stone commanded. Every Earth ship suddenly fired its emergency thrusters in different directions. In the zero gravity of space, they began spinning wildly, their weapons firing in unpredictable patterns. The Dominion fighters, programmed for traditional space combat, couldn't track the erratic movements. They're fighting like they're drunk, a council observer exclaimed. No, Reed corrected. They're fighting like humans. Look at their ship names. Thunder, Normandy, Dunkirk, Thermopylae. They've named their ships after battles where they refused to give up despite terrible odds. The Dominion fighters, confused by the unconventional tactics, started colliding with each other trying to track their targets. The larger Dominion ships held back, their commanders unsure how to respond to this apparent madness. Stone's voice crackled over the communication system. Phase 2. Initiate Operation Pearl Harbor Surprise. Suddenly, the cargo ships that had drifted to the edges of the battlefield split open. Inside each one were not supplies, but dozens of small, single-pilot fighters. Hundreds of them swarmed out, attacking the Dominion fleet from behind. Impossible. The Dominion fleet commander's voice boomed across all channels. Your species doesn't have this level of technology. We didn't, Stone replied cheerfully. Until we reverse-engineered the fighters you so kindly displayed during your space station tantrum. Amazing what humans can do in 3 months when properly motivated. Reed watched in astonishment as the human fighters, despite their crude construction, wreaked havoc on the Dominion fleet. They didn't fight like proper spacecraft. They fought like old Earth aircraft, pulling maneuvers that made no sense in space but somehow worked because they were so unexpected. Their pilots must be dying from the G-forces, a council scientist noted. Probably, Reed agreed, but they knew that going in, they just decided it was worth it. The Dominion fleet began to retreat, their perfect formations shattered by the chaos of human combat tactics. Over half their fighters were destroyed or disabled, and several of their capital ships showed significant damage. Stone's voice came over the channel one last time. To the Dominion fleet, we learned something interesting from our history. The more you push humans into a corner, the more creative we get about fighting back. This was just a taste. Want to see what we'll come up with next time? The remaining Dominion ships flowed into hyperspace. On the council vessel, Reed finished another note in his human behavior file. Warning: humans view combat restrictions as mere suggestions. Will intentionally use incorrect tactics if they might work. Consider all human vessels armed and dangerous, even if designated as civilian craft. As the Earth fleet regrouped, Reed noticed something else. The other council observers were watching the human ships with something new in their eyes. Not fear, but something far more dangerous to the galaxy's power structure. They were watching with admiration. Director Reed stood in front of the council, his usually neat uniform wrinkled from 3 days of non-stop research. The chamber was packed, not just with council members, but with representatives from dozens of species who wanted to understand how a pre-FTL civilization had just beaten the Dominion's elite fleet. Honorable Council, Reed began, I was wrong about humans. We all were. We thought they lacked something. The surrender response. But that's not it at all. They have something extra, something none of us have seen before. He displayed a series of brain scans on the floating screens. This is a normal species facing certain defeat. The scan showed areas of calm acceptance lighting up. This is a human facing the same situation. The scan blazed with activity across multiple regions. At first, we thought this was just stubbornness or madness. But look here. He pointed to a particular pattern. When we tell other species to surrender, their brains show acceptance of reality. When we tell humans to surrender, their brains start solving puzzles. Ambassador White, sitting in the observers section, smiled as murmurs spread through the chamber. Humans don't just refuse to surrender, Reed continued. They actively search for ways to win, even when winning seems impossible. They call it hope. It's not just an emotion. It's a survival tool millions of years in the making. He switched to footage from the recent battle. Look at their tactics. The spinning ships. That came from something they call break dancing. The swarm attacks. Inspired by Earth insects, they take ideas from everywhere, combine them in ways no one else would think of, and somehow make them work. A council member raised her hand. But surely they must realize when victory is truly impossible. That's the fascinating part, Reed replied. They do. They absolutely understand when they can't win. They just refuse to believe in the impossible. In their history, they crossed oceans in wooden boats, flew through air in metal tubes, and reached their moon using computers less powerful than our food dispensers. They didn't do these things because they were possible. They did them because they refused to believe they were impossible. He played more footage, this time from Earth's history, every time they faced extinction. From ice ages, predators, diseases, or each other, they didn't just survive. They got stronger. The Dominion's attack didn't weaken them. It gave them access to advanced technology, combat experience, and most importantly, a reason to unite. Are you suggesting they planned this? Another council member asked, horrified. Not exactly, but they were ready for it. Their entertainment media is full of stories about aliens attacking Earth. They've been mentally preparing for this fight for over a century. The Dominion didn't face a pre-FTL civilization. They faced a species that had already fought this war 1,000 times in their imaginations. Reed displayed his final piece of data. And now something unexpected is happening. Look at these readings from other worlds. Stories about the battle. Admiral Jones watched the tactical display with a mix of pride and amazement. Just 6 months ago, Earth had stood alone against the Dominion. Now ships from 20 different species filled his screen, their crews having learned that submission wasn't the only option. Sir, his communications officer called out, we're receiving another transmission. The mining colonies in the Centauri sector are rising up against their Dominion overseers. Add them to the list, Jones replied. The display updated, showing yet another system turning from Dominion red to Revolution green. Any response from their fleet? They're trying to fight rebels in 12 systems at once. Sir, they can't keep up. Director Reed, now serving as the official council liaison to Earth's military, studied the reports from across the galaxy. It's spreading faster than we ever imagined. The Dominion's entire empire was built on the assumption that inferior species would submit when threatened. Now that humans have shown there's another way. Now they're learning what happens when you build an empire on fear, Jones finished. Fear only works until someone stops being afraid. The bridge crew watched as another system declared its independence. The rebel ships weren't using Earth's exact tactics, they were creating their own, combining human ideas with their own unique abilities. The crab-like Kreks used their natural understanding of sideways movement to develop new attack patterns. The crystalline Lumini turned their transparent bodies into stealth advantages. Message from Earth Command, the communications officer announced. The combined fleet is ready. They're asking if we want to end this. Jones smiled. Tell them we're on our way. Director Reed, would you like to witness history? Reed nodded. The council will want a full report on how humans handle victory. They're still trying to understand why you haven't demanded revenge or absolute surrender from the Dominion. Because that's not the point, Jones said as his flagship, Hope's Dawn, moved into formation with the gathered fleet. Over 2,000 ships, representing 23 different species, fell into formation behind him. This was never about defeating the Dominion. It's about showing the galaxy there's always another choice. The fleet jumped into hyperspace, emerging near the Dominion's home system. The defending fleet was massive, almost 3,000 ships, but something was wrong with their formation. "Sir," Tactical reported, "we're detecting massive power fluctuations in the Dominion fleet. Some of their ships are turning away." Jones opened a channel to all ships, both friendly and Dominion. "This is Admiral Jones of the Combined Fleet. To all Dominion ships, we know that many of you serve out of fear. Today, we're offering you another option. You don't have to surrender. You don't have to fight. You can simply choose to stop being afraid." For a moment, nothing happened. Then one Dominion ship turned its engines off. Then another, and another. "They're shutting down their weapons," Tactical reported, amazement in his voice. "Entire battle groups are powering down." Reed watched in awe as the mighty Dominion fleet fell apart without a shot being fired. "You knew this would happen." "We hoped," Jones replied. "Fear is the weakest foundation for any civilization. Show people they have a choice, and they'll make the right one more often than not." As the combined fleet moved forward, more Dominion ships powered down. The few that tried to fight found themselves surrounded by their former victims, now armed with both human determination and their own unique strengths. Reed made his final note in the human behavior file. Most significant discovery: humans don't just reject surrender themselves. They make surrender obsolete for everyone else. Recommendation: classify humans not as a military threat, but as a philosophical revolution in progress. The age of submission was over. The age of hope had begun. The Intergalactic Council chamber looked very different now. Where once there had been rigid hierarchies of seating based on species rank, now representatives sat mixed together, sharing ideas and stories. Director Reed smiled as he prepared to give his final report on humanity's impact on galactic society. "1 year ago," he began, "we discovered a species that we thought was damaged because they lacked the ability to surrender. Today, I stand before you to officially recognize that we were the ones missing something." Ambassador White sat in the front row, drinking her ever-present coffee. Next to her, Admiral Jones watched with quiet pride. The Dominion's former Supreme Commander sat nearby, his once proud armor replaced with simple diplomatic robes. "The humans have not merely changed our military doctrine," Reed continued. "They have transformed how we think about possibility itself. Across the galaxy, species are rediscovering abilities they forgot they had." He displayed images on the floating screens. The aquatic merpeople, once confined to water worlds, now building ships to explore space. The heavy gravity titans, previously used only as manual labor, becoming master engineers. The microscopic dust collective forming into computing networks more powerful than anything previously known. In just 1 year, we've seen more technological and social advancement than in the previous century. Not because humans gave us new technology, but because they showed us how to stop limiting ourselves. The former Supreme Commander stood up. "If I may speak." Reed nodded, and the massive alien faced the council. "My species believed that power came from enforcing submission. The humans taught us that true strength comes from refusing to submit to limitations. My own children now attend Earth schools, learning not just human tactics, but human hope." Ambassador White set down her coffee cup. "We never wanted to teach the galaxy how to fight," she said. "We wanted to teach you how to dream." The surrender response evolved because it helped species survive. But humans evolved something else: the ability to imagine a better future, no matter how dark the present. "And that brings us to our final recommendation," Reed said. "The Council has voted to create a new position, Guides of Innovation, and we ask Earth to take this role. not because they're the most advanced species, but because they're the best at seeing potential where others see impossibility. Admiral Jones stepped forward. "We accept on one condition." He smiled. "That you stop calling it human hope and start calling it what it really is: galactic determination. We didn't give you anything you didn't already have. We just reminded you it was there." The chamber erupted in cheers. Even the most traditional council members had to admit that the galaxy was better now. Trade had increased, exploration had expanded, and for the first time, species were working together as equals rather than rulers and subjects. Reed made his very last entry in the Human Behavior File, which had become one of the most studied documents in galactic history. Final update: the human inability to surrender was never a bug in their evolution. It was a preview of the next step in galactic development. They weren't missing something we had. They had something we all needed. He looked up at the chamber's ceiling, where a new motto had been carved: "The only true defeat is accepting defeat." Below it, in smaller letters: "Warning, humans ahead. Surrender not recommended." Ambassador White finished her coffee and stood up. "So," she said to the assembled representatives of 1,000 worlds, "what impossible thing should we achieve next?" The galaxy, no longer bound by the concept of surrender, had an infinite number of answers to that question. And thanks to humanity's gift of stubborn hope, they had an infinite amount of determination to achieve them all. The end.